when I was teenager. When I came from Bangladesh, originally I'm from Bangladesh. I was a professional soccer player, so no one plays soccer in our district. So I have to find people who play soccer. Then I start collecting young people from the neighborhood and came a group, and we start soccer. And this league is still going on almost 36 years, and I'm the founder of this organization. And I can give you at least around 30 to 40,000 young kids played in this soccer league and move on to better world, went to college, went to high school and get degree and move into better life. I'm still existing president of the sport organization. Plus, I'm a community activist. I have achieved so many things that I have elected officials have done it, not done it, and I advocated, which is actually I do have a vision. Whatever need to be done in the community, I see it and I make it happen. There was a DOT came out with the pedestrian plaza in the underserved community. They never come, so I saw the opportunity. I applied and advocated for 2 years. Finally, we were able to open a plaza. There was an empty lot. Was people used to throw garbage and it was made our neighborhood so disgusting. So MTA never leased out the space. So we forcefully took it over. We made it into garden. Then we leased them from MTA. Our organization paid the lease yearly, but we transform our neighborhood into our community garden where all the seniors, young kids come out and enjoy. Plus, I founded one of the, I would not say large, one of the active nonprofit organization called Back This, and our mission to help helpless people. Every immigrant come to the United States with only one mission, land of opportunity. Majority of people, when they come to America, first, they don't speak their own language properly because they never had the opportunity to go to school in their country.
What happened? He got quiet.
Yeah,
Right?
your sound is.
Yes.
Yeah, and let's.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
So when they come to America, they don't speak English. So we help them with the ESL class, with the workforce, and we help them build a resume, help them find a job so they can sustain themselves. So I'm not going to exaggerate. So my whole life, entire life, advocating for the community and empowering the people, that's what I've been doing. And right now, I have little interest to run in politics, but never was so much when all the community approached me to represent them, because our community being mostly nepotism is controlled by a group of people, have too much power. They never came to this part of it. Even this pandemic, community leader like us took a step and feed over 40,000 people, as Sandy Nars said. We took our responsibility in our hand, not the political or elected representative. That's why I'm running to represent District 37.
Thank you. And that's right. District 37 was Raf Espinal's seat, which he vacated right at the same time as the pandemic began. I remember that, right? It was right like that. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Okay, Steve, go ahead with your question.
All right. Well, there's a lot of talk and now with a lot of leftists thinking about community land trusts and nonprofit developers, building housing. At the same time, there was HPD that controls this, Housing Preservation and Development, which is a city agency. How, as a city council person, would you oversee both HPD and its relationship with the nonprofit developers and keep them from taking private property in the name of affordable housing? If you even think, Steve.
Maybe we should begin with the councilwoman and see how she deals with it and then open it up.
Yes.
Definitely, I won't be shy in sharing with you that it's a lot more complicated than meets the eye. Definitely in my short experience, I've noticed there's a lot of politics within the process. The best way to do this is to keep your eye on the prize, follow the money, research on the developers that are a part of the conversation. And as Rick experienced, we have to be mindful of the staff that's on the other side and monitor the conversations. I've definitely learned in my short experience that people have not followed through on their commitments. Paperwork has gotten lost in the process, and good people have gotten hurt, through this process. So my bottom line is keep your eye on the prize, figure out who the developers are. If it means you have to delay a project a couple of months, it makes more sense to do that. Because definitely, as New Yorkers, as a 37 councilmatic district, we know what the rezone has done to our community. We were offered a lot of prizes, and our bag is half empty right about now. So definitely my bottom line is stay focused and look at the small print.
Thank you.
And I know Rick began to talk about this and the councilwoman just mentioned. So Rick, why don't you go next? Mute.
Let's all be appalled because the problems are very serious and organizations across the political spectrum are implicated in the corruption and the mismanagement and the neglect of affordable housing programs, the abuses across the board on the left, center, and right. So I'm calling for the reorganization of HPD and breaking it up into smaller entities. It's unsavable. It is the reason that we have such a severe housing crisis. And I think that we have to be really careful about electing people to the city council who have very specific understanding, knowledge, and detail about every single HPD program and how it's designed, how it's functioned, how its historical granting has performed, to perform the proper oversight on a path towards breaking it up as soon as possible.
Is there anyone else that has experience? We'll hear from everyone, but anyone else has experience working with this issue?
I've been a supporter of many housing actions and housing organizations that have hosted rallies, have tried to create pressure on HPD, especially in 7A takeovers. We're working with a group right now in the Cypress Hills area that's facing incredible disrepair and disarray of their building. And they're going to need to rely on HPD to step in. And we know that to make that happen, we're going to have to create a lot of pressure and rally. And we shouldn't have to do that. And I agree, we need to take care of the people who are working there, but we also need to have stronger oversight. I'm really excited and supportive of the work that our new Assemblywoman Emily Gallagher is doing and Brad Holyman in pushing for an audit of 421A and other programs. We need to really put attention on that from the state level, and we're going to need to have the city council and state representatives working together to really hold this agency accountable. So I understand that we shouldn't have to muster the amount of resources that we do just to get HPD to respond to things, and we do have to hold them accountable. And I do believe that I have built the coalition across state representatives, federal representatives, and city council members to make sure that we actually get over the finish line and make sure we hold this agency accountable.
I just want to jump in there and talk about, I agree about the need for accountability. I agree about the need for stronger oversight. I also think to directly respond to the needs of the district, there was an East New York plan that was passed a couple of years ago. And, there was a lot of promises made. We don't know if they've been kept, but since that time, there hasn't been a review as a status report writ large, right? So I think the first step is let's do a status report on the East New York plan, see which agencies are responsible, hold them accountable, let's see where they are. Let's possibly fine tune the plan to the times that we're currently in now, and we can move forward from there and hold agencies like HPD accountable as we move forward.
Just a FYI, Chris, so you know, I have had conversation with the mayor, and that is part of the process. As a resident of the district, I will invite you to the conversation.
I'm welcome to attend.
That's nice. Some collaboration already in this debate. That's great. Mispa, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I have a total different vision than everyone said, and I correct me, because I lived all my life 40 years in district. Where all those developers? Why are they coming? Because they've been sucking all the land all over. They did gentrification. Developer came and developed. Before anything happened, we need to fix our infrastructure, because our community board decide most of the thing what's happened. They should prove it or not. Our community board are not anymore real community board. It's political board designed by political people. What they want to be proved, they prove it. Regardless how we, as a resident, how we want it, doesn't matter. I think we need to first structure ourselves. We need to find people who really advocate for the community. We need to fix the community board. Whatever comes in our plate, they need to find that. I'm a part of one of the affordable housing in Grant Avenue. At least I would say over 20 developers reach out to me because I'm advocating this community. I have a very strong hold in community. They offered me so many, they offer $500,000 on my plate to get this done. I said, no, we are a nonprofit organization. We're just asking for 5,000 square feet where we have a community space. We can provide after school program, community meeting. So finally develop able to give free of cost the whole 5,000 square feet to our organization for the community. And we worked with partner and we've been awarded this $79 million for the housing. I think that's how we need to advocate the entire neighborhood. Because there's a family I know in front of me, I lost at least 12 friends of mine who grew up in this neighborhood because we are border of Brooklyn, Queens, one of the most dangerous neighborhood because people know where to do crime and move across from one border to another border, and so many people die from family member. It's not the time they come in, develop, and kick them out. And also, a lot of people say 50% housing should go to the neighborhood. And you know how they kick it out? They kick it out checking credit report. Why people want the affordable house for people who have a bad credit report is our responsibility. People who have a bad credit because they have a financial need. They're not able to keep up to their financial, that's why their credit is messed. It's our responsibility. They should not look for the credit report. They should look for the last 5 or 10 years where they live, did they pay the rent? They should see the accountability. The only people who I think in my affordable, looking for affordable house who cannot able to cope up with their finance. I think this is most important part before I want to go into the whole thing. We want to first secure our people in the resident before anything else, before they come into district and do housing. I'm sorry. There's a lot of other, and I want to talk about it, but I know it's not time enough, but that's my point. I want to start from infrastructure from bottom before anything happens to our district.
Right. Any other comments on housing that anyone wants to talk about in this platform before we move on to the next topic?
I'd just like to follow up on Mr. Abdin's statement about the DOT parking lot. I thank you for bringing it up. That the DOT parking lot was a lot that I asked to be surveyed as we were doing the rezoning of the 37 Schnepps District. And as we were looking to see underutilized space, as the plaza that Mr. mentioned, the senior space, that the unit that he's talking about, we had 2 lots in the district. And thankfully for community negotiations, we were able to get that underutilized space where now it's going to be 155 modular units. And that's the kind of conversation that we should be having, looking at underutilized space within our district to ensure that the most vulnerable people are able to have equitable housing. But thank you, Ms. for reminding me of all the work I've done in City Line. We were great partners at Bagdies. I happen to be a co-founder of Bagdies. So thank you for sharing with everyone all the work that we did. Thank you.
So now, yeah. Oh,
Comment. So, you know, the real estate is not going to dig us out of this problem, but neither is professional activism or, you know, the left, right? Because, you know, they'll win a campaign and a housing campaign and think they made progress, right? But this is the people's moment. This is the moment where the people have to demand accountability from their city government.
I'm sorry, that is just a factually inaccurate statement. Who do you think has been out there fighting for housing reform at the state level? Who do you think has been out here championing? That is the left, that is the progressive movement. There have been, who are made up of working class women, single mothers, undocumented workers, families. These are member-led organizations. These are social movements. These are people who weren't a part of activism, who became forced activists, who are now standing up and fighting at the city level for our rights. So to say that the left or groups are not able to deliver is inaccurate and unnecessary. There are plenty of people who have stepped into these movements to fight for real hard wins for every single person here. And I think those folks need to be respected. A lot of these are women, poor people, working people, and they shouldn't be dismissed with a broad stroke. We have an incredible untenable housing crisis in place. We have a looming eviction crisis that's about to happen, and we really don't have time to waste on depicting whether or not the left is able to deliver. We actually need to focus on the solutions at hand. I know I'll be focused on supporting the audit of the 421A program. I'm going to be supporting lots of implementation of reforming property tax reform, ending the tax lien sale, fully funding NYCHA, pushing for us to develop on vacant lots, but also some vacant lots need to be left open green spaces. We need to focus on increasing the voucher amount so that Section 8 holders can have access to market rate apartments. We need to expand the right to counsel to all sorts of income brackets and all across the city. So there's a lot more that needs to be done, and we really don't need to waste time on the left or the center.
I do agree with that. And I'm only jumping in just to say this is definitely a hot button issue where we all have what we want, right? So there's a thing, policy, politics, procedure. We want to influence policy, screw the politics and the procedure that affects the people that it's going to affect, right? The community needs to be heard. They can't be dismissed. They're the people, we're the people that's living these things day in, day out. Let's have a dialogue. We all have ways that we can make this correct. We all have policies that we've worked on. We all have initiatives that we want to put in place. This is where we sit at the table and kind of try to demystify the beast.
Well, it's easy to support them if you read their platforms and their agendas and their program policies. It's harder when you see their books.
No, agreed. And that's why I said this is something that this is not a silver bullet. This is not a silver bullet issue.
I mean,
this is something.
There's a certain naivety I played. It's okay. I appreciate the policy victories here, but until you've seen the books, I unfortunately had to terminate a contract of a left-leaning progressive group that is very prominent based on aspects of fraud and corruption. So trust me, we need to be independent of the coalitions on the council.
I think that we can have conversations about nonprofits all day and boards all day, and there should be audits, and that's why we have rules and policies around nonprofits. But at the end of the day, there are plenty of organizations that are fighting for these things, and we need to be focused on that.
Called protectionism. So if someone supports you specifically so that you can get on the council, so you don't perform those audits. Right? It's called protectionism. That's why we need independent candidates to get onto the council who can not be accountable to the entities that back them to get them there, but to the people and the needs of those people in those districts. We have a very bad actor in our own district here, Riseboro. It's a terrible situation, okay? So, you know, I'm not here to name names. I'm just here to sound the alarm because I've seen the books and I've seen the conditions. So I'm not naive about, you know, what needs to happen.
Yeah, Steve, that's your favorite topic, isn't it?
I know. I just think there is, having covered third-party transfer extensively, nonprofits during the Bloomberg administration where they had to say the properties they managed and owned and developed, and now they don't. You can't find Riseboro, St. Nick's Alliance, Fifth Avenue Committee. We can go on, and we can never get an accounting of what properties they own and manage. And then that's what went back to HPD. And I'm not running, but I do think it goes back to my original question of how can you get it to find an accounting of a for-profit developer is easier than finding an accounting of a nonprofit developer.
I make an complaint against a nonprofit developer or a progressive housing group, right? A DOI, it goes down a black hole and no one ever sees it. That's what's happening to us right now.
And some of the nonprofit developers also do, and I'd like to ask this, do you believe a nonprofit developer should also do foreclosure counseling? Because if they do foreclosure counseling, they get inside information, and then before you know it, they own the foreclosure. So I'm curious how you as a candidate, do you believe a nonprofit developer should also do foreclosure counseling? I
don't. And I'm definitely enjoying the conversation that we're having and what you're bringing to light. No, that definitely there should be a split. And Sandy and the rest of you, so you know, we are lobbying at the city council level to increase the voucher amounts. We know at the council that it makes no sense. Like I shared earlier, I know what it is to be homeless. I worked for 13 years with the homeless population. And with the system, the vouchers that we have now are disgraceful. So just know that those of us that are in the trenches are trying to make more sense of it. In reference to the separation, as I said earlier, Steve, it has to happen. We're in an era where we need to be clear, right? We need to make sure that the books are not cooked, that whether it's Chris or it's Mitzvah or Sandy Nurse are able to walk into a facility and say, let me see your 990, right? Let me see your paper trace. Unfortunately, we're living in a society that isn't alluring to that, but I think that that's where we need to go. The city as a whole has many pockets that we're not able to see in. So
I just want to.
Well, we should also be really resourcing many different community-based service providers and organizations to do that foreclosure prevention work, to do that targeted outreach. We have to put more resources into that community. The caseloads, the backlogs are too much, and that's why people are being displaced. So yes, overlapping conflict of interest within nonprofit organizations is not good. Super large conglomerate nonprofits, not good. They should not be the only voice in the community, but that's why we have to be supportive and nurturing of new organizations that are coming into the fold. 990s are available publicly. If it's not up there, that organization should be held accountable. This is the law. This is state law, and it's already there. So making sure that we can hold these organizations accountable for the money they're getting, for the deliverables that they're being promised for, that they promised to, based on the funding that they're getting, has to be a part of the plan. And yes, the city government, as with all governments, is a big behemoth. It is a giant slow sloth. There is so much that needs to be cleaned up. I know this. My mother was a civil servant in her entire life. She still is. I grew up listening to her come home raging about fraud, waste, and abuse every single day of my life. I understand the challenges. We still have to ensure that those resources hit the ground. And sometimes there are organizations that are the only organizations that are best equipped with the reach to make those resources hit the ground. So if we want to break that up, we need to support new groups coming into the fold, make sure that they're being accountable, and make sure that they have the funding they need to get those services to people who are really, really suffering.
Thank you. So let's dive into another issue now. An equally as hot issue is public safety and this notion of defunding the police, or whatever you think it means, reimagining the police, working with the police, abolishing the police. I've heard all the different opinions. So let's dive into that issue so each candidate can really voice their feelings on that, because I know a lot of voters like to choose candidates that are aligned one way or the other. And this can be a conversation if you want.
So
Scott.
I can go ahead.
Yeah.
Of course, defunding came from Black Lives Matter coming. I am supporter of Black Lives Matter, but defunding police, I'm not favor of it. It's just because throughout my life, I have seen our district is one of the most craziest districts. So many people get shot every other day, and I seen it. And I always tell people, if you have a golden house and golden car, and if you're not safe in your home, what are you gonna do with your golden car and golden home? Quality and safety is most important. Police is work, get paid with our tax money defunding. I think within a police, we should create a internal affair where they can be fired, hired anytime. They should be jeopardized. People, we should have a agency within an agency just to look over the cop, bad cop and good cop who's doing the job right, because there's no nation in the world without law and order. Police department is to maintain law and order in the city, and that need to be stay, and we cannot defund it because we want to be stay home safe. Especially America is one of the most diversity culture. We're still learning, we're still understanding with the diversity. There's still different belief and different factor with the race, faith, and color, always a problem. And we have to be extra cautious in the district, of course, and we need to work with the police department. It was, I would say about 10 years ago when, 10, maybe 50, I'm not accurate, there was a community police. Police used to walk around in the neighborhood. They used to know everyone in the neighborhood. I think we need to restart them. We need to, police is a human being. Police, and the people were saying there was police and the public was fighting. Who's police? Police is not public. He's a public. He's just with the uniform. We have to understand he's working for us. He need to understand us, and we need to understand. We have to create that bridge, but we cannot terminate it. We need to have a law and order to sustain.
Council.
Look, I wanted to respectfully disagree with Ms. Moore on this one. He made some very fine points, but I will have to say, you know, the city itself needs to move away from its historical reliance on police services that can be better provided by government and local organizations. And I referenced this with a 2-week study that happened last year in Brownsville, where community organizations replaced the beat cops that were on Belmont and Mother Gaston. And throughout that span, no crime has occurred. So I think while they're cool, law and order, great, but at the same time, you know, the NYPD operates from an ivory tower that's not reminiscent of the people who's actually living on the ground. The community organizations are. So if nothing else that needs to happen, there needs to be a partnership between the two. But police officers aren't trained in mental health. However, there are community organizations with people who directly deal with mental health issues. And so when we talk about this, well, there needs to be law and order and everything like that. Let's really look at this. Let's review the state and city criminal codes to identify laws that should be replaced, because a lot of them disproportionately affects negatively Black and brown New Yorkers. Let's establish a real system for holding NYPD officers accountable. The CCRB is great, but I think they can do more. Let's increase funding to legal aid organizations that provide pro bono legal defense. Because just to say there needs to be law and order whitewashes the entire issue with regard to public safety.
I 100% agree with Chris, and we do have a little bit of disagreement, but I think what's happening at the national level and at the citywide level, the conversation we're having about policing is really important, and it's going to really be defined over the next 2 to 4 years. And I personally am someone who believes that we have a crisis in policing, and that the current way of approaching safety, public safety, is not working. Last year, we had an increase in budget, we had an increase in staff, and we had an increase in crime, gun violence, and death. And I say this as someone who has been a victim of gun violence. I've had a gun pointed to my head, in my face. I've seen people killed in front of me by gun violence. I've had domestic violence in my home. Violence has defined a big part of my upbringing. But what I would say is that I believe that we deeply need to invest in public safety services that actually address the root cause of crime. And that involves ending poverty and improving the living conditions of people in our community. And this is really about the budget. We are spending disproportionately huge amounts of money on policing, military grade equipment, misconduct settlements, and not spending enough on the public services that actually save lives. We are not spending on homelessness services. We are not spending on education, workforce development. These are things that are a part of contributing to public safety, people feeling safe. When we were out canvassing for 6 weeks last summer, the number one thing people felt about what makes us feel safe is that their garbage was picked up every week. When a block doesn't look like it's taken care of, people feel unsafe. So we need to really break the mold. We need to listen to what's happening across the city, across the country, and in this community. And we need to put money into the programs that are actually going to support people in having housing security and stability and opportunities in front of them that reduce propensity to be in situations where you get involved in things you're not supposed to be involved in. So I think I will be someone who is standing along other council members, hopefully in advocating for divesting from some of the NYPD and putting that money into community services that actually contribute to safety.
Well, thank you. That was very powerfully said. I appreciate that. Right. I appreciate you touching on all those points. As a brown man of color who lives in New York City and experienced a lot of this stuff. I would add to that. on a managerial level, the NYPD has a pretty significant problem with a white supremacist structure, right? Of the 2,500 managerial roles at the NYPD, 85% are white, right? We need to change that dynamic. I spoke, excuse me?
Is that true?
Yes, the city reported on that several months ago. And I spoke to officers, rank and file, and told them, I remember as a kid, we, community organizers came together to try to diversify the police department, right? Like mostly white. And now we have this problem. We have a significant, managerial domination by one, class of people. And that's part of the dynamic. I agree largely with Sandy and on several points.
Mhm. And Dharma Diaz, what about you? And what are you doing even in your current capacity on this issue?
In my current capacity, I'm working, and I think Sandy was right. As you all had good points in reference to many of our issues are social issues, and if we don't get to the core of what's happening, it's going to continue to boom. Unfortunately, within the 75th precinct, it's a training ground. The perception is if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, similar to the Frank Sinatra song. Unfortunately, it has also led to the highest report of incidents to CCRB. I share to say that we can learn a lot. Black Lives Matter is the movement taught us to not. Discrimination, came up, we saw it, it's real. But how do we make it better? Do I believe that the budget for NYPD needs to be worked on? It needs to be treated? Absolutely. Maybe 20 years ago, when I participated in the Citizens Academy, what I was taught was police officers are social workers with a gun. What happened to that? Obviously, it was a myth. And we see that and we know that. Definitely don't feel comfortable with pulling out a community affairs officer for 3 hours and saying, now you can go at the train station and work with a homeless person. It's not that easy. I definitely, like I said, it's a mixed bag of conversation that we had here, but at the end of the day, it's getting to the core. Too much funding being allocated in the wrong places. And if we want to fix what's broken, is let's sit down and have real conversation. And that's what it is. Many of us have been advocates here. We know boots on the ground. Now, I'm glad that NYPD has decided to put coalitions of community folks and picking a commander. 2 of my precincts, that's what I'm experiencing. And I'm hoping that community indeed has picked the right commanding officers. Time will tell. But definitely community input is where we need to be. It's our community and we know it best.
I know everybody, what you guys said, community. I live all my life on the street. I can tell you, I've been picked up by cop at least 10 or more times. In teenager, when I was immigrant, I always got picked by, I'm not gonna say different race because I was look like Indian. They used to call me Indian, Gandhi. I used to have a bad temper and jump into fight. I call 911 for help. Police came, instead of arresting them, they picked me up, but I still was safe. The cop was here. If I would stay there, I would fight. They probably kill me or I would get hurt. But one thing, taking a funding from police is not solving the problem. We need to solve the problem. There is a discrimination. There is a corrupted cop. We need to fix this one. Before everybody talking about funding, nothing to do with funding. We have to, that when the when City Hall, all the elected mayor will be decided, they will come out with the budget where they need to be allocated. Where funding is not the concern. Everybody concerning about defunding. This is not a movement. The movement need to be fixed. The system needs to be fixed. And I still believe, and a strong belief on that.
But I'm a major part of the problem. You cannot effectively address the root causes of poverty and people in desperation if we are not funding the programs and services that are meant to address this. If we are spending $1 on NYPD and less than 25 cents on anything else, this is a problem. It is an imbalanced budget, and it is a matter of funding. We only have so much to go around. So if we want to actually get at the social issues, and I'm sorry that that happened to you as a teenager, that's terrible that that officer mislabeled you in that way and was racist towards you. But in order to get away from situations where you've got a bunch of teenagers on a fight on the street, we need to make sure they have things to do. And that involves funding programs and activities, making sure our schools have the infrastructure and curriculum that they need. This is exactly about funding. It's also about white supremacy, but it is specifically, concretely, you can deal with it in a way that's a little bit different to deal with in terms of white supremacy. You can deal with it through the budget.
I'll have to say, you know, a budget is literally a document of priorities, right? So to say, you know, let's keep the funding for the police, but let's decrease the funding for some of youth employment is a farce. You know, like, let's be real. I'm a black man in America, growing up in Glenmore Plaza, almost got beat on by walking through Houston Playground, which is right behind several years back. So let's be real, where yes, there's white supremacy, and the only way we can actually make an actual statement is reallocate this funding towards community groups on the ground who actually know the issues, who actually live in the community, who actually knows what people are going through on a daily basis. For you to say, let's keep the funding and not aid the social service organizations that's providing the services on the ground that people sorely need. I can't resonate with that. I can't resonate with that.
I kind of feel like I have to go back, and for full disclosure, it seems that just about all of us have had a negative interaction with NYPD. Having put a gun to my head simply because I was traveling from Ridgewood, Queens into Cypress Hills and accused of being a drug dealer was pretty scary, you know, or stopped in the community because I put a profile. I get it, you know, and it's real. And it's our place as organizers, as leaders, to have the tough conversations and to move it. You know, I'm also not comfortable with, and you're right, Chris, we need organizations. Glenmore, I mean, I love Elite Learners as an example of what they're doing. I want to change the conversation from violence interrupters to influencers. I think it's time for us to have a different conversation. Steve, you know that their words are powerful.
Yeah, I just wanted to point one thing out, because I'm looking up comp stats, and it was either the 7.3 or the 7.5 where they changed the CO.
Yes,
and
yes.
It's actually working. I mean, and it had nothing to do with the funding, but it was changing the CO to the guy that was from the community. I forgot his name. And it's still kind of high crime, but compared to citywide, it's actually pretty good, because usually the 7.3 and 7.5 are among the city leaders. And
So,
if I may answer to that, the 7.3, the former commanding officer was moved because it was bona fide, it was proven that he behaved inaccurately. Elected officials got together, they negotiated, and they were able to remove, and it was the commander of the 7.3, and it seems to be a much stronger relationship within that section of the community. So again, it goes back to the testament, getting the right people at the table, you can have the right conversation, have the right outcomes.
so I just want to move along. I know we talked about housing and we talked about public safety. We have about 10 minutes left. So I want to know from you if there's one other topic that you feel is strong in the community that we should address as a group and maybe figure out your differences of opinion.
To me, healthcare is a big to-do. You know, as someone, my prior employer did not offer me medical coverage. I paid, you know, whether I went to a private clinic and paid $150 or went to the local to Woodhull Hospital and paid $15. I think that community needs to know, you know, that healthcare is available. We have to push for it. I've sat on 3 boards of local hospitals. The bottom line is healthcare is a big issue. We need to change the conversation. We need to encourage our brothers and sisters to get up and go, right? We all know the 37 Councilmatic District was hit pretty hard with COVID. Diabetes is hard, the rates are high, asthma is high. You know, during the pandemic, fruits and vegetables that we normally did not eat were introduced to us. I think through health and nutrition, we can help combat some of the medical ailments that they were suffering in our community. So to me, healthcare would be another big conversation.
I agree with that. And, for the last 12 years, I've been a huge advocate for Medicare for all and universal healthcare coverage, because medical debt is one of the top bankrupters of all American families. 62% of all bankruptcies are a result of medical debt. I've been a freelancer for a long time. I was a carpenter and I never had healthcare insurance for a long time. So I'm going to be supportive of the New York Healthcare Act. But a bigger conversation around this is also the climate crisis that's coming, environmental injustice, air pollution. These are all issues that are intersecting around our chronic health issues that are here in the community. Lack of access to good, nutritious food, affordable food, grocery stores in our community that you can go to easily. These are all areas where, if we want to have a sound community health and well-being plan, we need to make sure we have leaders who understand not just about some of the 4 essential programs like the Essential Plan, New York's Essential Plan, and MCAS, but we also need to make sure that we have someone who is very well versed in how to address some of the coming challenges around the climate crisis that are going to drastically impact our community's health, whether it's floods and the mold and mildew that's left in the walls, whether it's the depots that are putting air and diesel air into the air pollution into the air, whether it's lead in the housing, whether it's just a lack of access. So we have a very clear need to make sure we just have a leader who is able to and is well versed on all these issues. I want to just say that I am the only candidate in this race with a comprehensive action plan that addresses everything from senior care to the climate crisis, to housing, to transportation that is publicly available, that has been informed by our community members. So I think we need to make sure that whoever gets the seat is someone who is able to hold all of the buckets of the crises that we are facing, and who understands how they work together, and who has built the coalition and has an understanding of how we get through this crisis by looking at all of the things at once.
And I want to.
I just want to add. I just want to answer to Sandy. I think most of the people who's on the screen are part of the problem, all the problem, and we are just wanting to see council. And I'm very strong on education and young leadership and affordable housing, because in order to empower our district, we need to have a better education. Our kids, every kid in the city, but our schools are failing in our district because it's not well represented. Affordable housing, as we talked about earlier, affordable housing are coming. But you know what? Make 50%, they always say community will get it. But end of the day, maybe 10%. We have to find it, fix it, how we can fix them and we can help those people. Because what happened in Williamsburg and Bushwick, gentrification kick them out. We want to keep people. I know a lot of family who lost their family member and they living all their life because this part of the district the rent was cheap. They can able to sustain. Now, just because of gentrification, I don't want people to move out of this district. They lost family member. I think they should stay here. And I want to repeat again, we need a young leadership in our district. And it's more important, education is the first priority. It doesn't matter what race, color, or faith. Everybody have to get equal.
Right. Okay. Education. Just circle back on health.
So,
did you want to?
Oh no, so I was going to run the gamut, right? So we talked about healthcare and the need for access. So first and foremost, going through the experience that my fiance had with regard to having our child, it really highlighted the lack of access, accessibility with regard to having a doula, the lack of information that's there. And this is also we're dealing with the trauma of having a close friend of ours pass away last year due to complications during childbirth. And, yes, we're all here lucky enough to have resources and everything available, but at the same time, our neighbors do not. Right. So this is something that we need to really invest in when we talk about access, affordability to healthcare, especially when we talk about maternal mortalities. Right. When Sandy talked about climate, there's a crazy stat that, the world every 5 years is going up 15 degrees. Right. And literally nature is the solution to that problem. It is green spaces. It is, reducing plastics. And I've also been in the forefront of that work as well, right? And I tie this, so Ms. Will talked about education. I was part of the team that enrolled 250,000 children to free full-day pre-K. I ensured that 3K was implemented in District 23, covering the 37th Council District as well. And I tie this all in to workforce development, because I also believe that's the great equalizer. You have a lot of people who come in and say, I'm going to hire from the community, only to do a tepid search and say we can't find anybody. And that's because, they haven't been held accountable. Nobody's saying, you know what, we're going to train, hire, and provide supports once placed. And I'm not just talking about the brick and mortar jobs. I'm talking about offshore wind. I'm talking about solar energy. I'm talking about biological, ecological monitoring. These are 21st century jobs, and this is not just for our youth, but also veterans, our people who are looking to change careers, our formerly incarcerated. If we really want to provide opportunity and close the wealth gap in New York City, these are the things that we need to do in order to address these things. And so for me, workforce development is that way that addresses a lot of the issues that we discussed today.
Okay, thank you. And Rick, I just wanted to give you a chance to chime in, and then we'll go around to this concluding question.
Main, I think, concerns, one around the climate justice. So we absolutely need to move towards reducing carbon emissions around the city, and District 37 can be a leading part of that. I'm very encouraged by Local Law 97. Large buildings are our largest carbon emitters in the city, but and also reform of the waste removal, private waste industry, garbage removal. But the problem that we face is oversight, right? And oversight requires managerial experience. I'm the only candidate in this race that has direct city government managerial experience. And so implementation around climate justice policies is our #1 problem, right? Because Local Law 97, they staff 7 people to oversee the implementation on enforcement on tens of thousands of buildings, a practical impossibility. And then moving on to the second core concern is the situation that home healthcare workers face in our district. There are thousands of them. They are undercompensated. I stepped up to try to lead them and draw attention to their fight for fair pay. I was the only candidate that did that. Unfortunately, the Fair Pay Act did not pass, but we need to move towards an independent cooperative for home care workers in District 37 and move away from the management model.
Thank you.
And Sky, I just want to push back on one thing. Rick, it's not the implementation, it's the funding. And the funding for Local Law 97, the funding for retrofitting our public buildings, doing HVAC systems, installing brand new windows. Like, I'm a carpenter, I know what construction is needed to make our buildings retrofitted, and it takes a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of public contracts to make that happen for our public buildings. It's going to take a lot of money to get our private buildings up and running. It's not an implementation problem, it's a funding problem. And just one other thing, I've also been standing with healthcare workers. I'm very proud to be supported by the Nurses Association, the Nurses Union, and 1199 to make sure that they are supported in their fight.
Thank you. Look, we are at time, but I want to go around really quick instead of a conclusion, since it's 9 o'clock. Leave everyone, the voters, everyone who's watching, with a word or phrase that you want everyone to remember about you and your campaign and what you stand for. So let's go with Dharma Diaz first.
I stand as a product of the 37 Councilmatic District. I know what it is to have and not to have. I know what it is to be boots on the ground. Vote for me June 22nd. That's what you're gonna get. It's the real deal. I'm here with you to work with you. And to my cohorts here, thank you for this opportunity. It's a democratic process. And I've definitely enjoyed my conversation here tonight.
Thank you. Sandy Nurse, word or phrase that represents you.
Our whole campaign, our grassroots campaign, is about equity, inclusion, and justice for this community. I really want to emphasize our transparency, that we've gone above and beyond to include our community in this process, that we are pro-democracy, we are not anti-democratic, and I'm just very excited to be with you all.
He's growling. Rick Echevarria, a word or phrase that represents you.
Protection. I'm running to protect the people of the 37th district from historical abuses and to root out corruption in our housing programs.
Thank you. Misbah Abdeen.
Yes. All my life advocated for District 37 from day one, and I have well experience from A to Z. Vote for me on June 22nd. What I've been doing, regardless if I win or not, I'll be still working. But if you make me representative, I think I can work. I will have a better platform to represent you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chris, give us a word or phrase.
I'm not the exception to the rule. I am the rule. I have worked both in city government and in community organizing, a product of my community, a son of Brownsville, and 16 years experience in the game. This is what the district needs in addition to, the ability to collaborate and build coalitions to move forward as we begin to recover from this pandemic. Thank you all for having me out here today. And I really do enjoy the riveting conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, District 37 candidates. Thanks for being part of Schneps Media's Politics NY debate/forum/discussion. I'm Sky. This is Steve with a tie, and we really appreciate it on behalf of Schneps and Politics NY. Visit our website, politicsny.com, and thank you to the Brooklyn Public Library for amplifying these candidates' voices. Send us your op-eds, tag us on social media. Our job is to amplify your voices to the community because we want to get as many people out to vote as possible this year. So thank you, take care, good luck, and good night.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So much.
Bye.
Bye.